Indian culture. So it says about Indian culture, it talks about experiential learning. How many of us actually know it's India where experiential learning actually blossomed in the Gurukuls? So Gurukuls were an absolute, what should I say, example of experiential learning where everything was learned from experience, learning by doing. And it was not only about academic uh, content, it was about value system. It was about physical development. It was about acquiring other skills. So today, if we're talking about art education, we're talking about music, we're talking about martial arts, sports. So all of it was done in India just the way, and all these universities that flourished, and we are back to there. So it's very, very important to teach our children, begins from there, appreciating the Indian culture, taking the best out of it. Our history, our culture, our heritage has so much to offer. And I mean, we won't get into the reasons. History is bears testimony to the various reasons why no, we somehow lost touch. This, and especially this particular generation, really doesn't appreciate, because there's so much into copying the West, and all of it has some vested reasons. So it's very important for us. It begins from there. It begins from the school, that we teach our children national pride, culture pride, and patriotism, in the sense that they should be proud of their mother tongue, their motherland, and all that all that it has to offer, and everything else that they learn. They have to be global citizens at the end of the day. So not only good citizens of the country, they have to be absolutely contributing global citizens, and it begins from the micro level of the classroom to the macro level. Uh, as it was mentioned by Sir, even Mr. Toffler has says, the literate of the 21st century will not be the ones who have acquired degrees or are educated in schools and universities and have learned. They would be the ones who can learn, unlearn, and relearn. Now, that is so very relevant. And the entire policy actually revolves around that, because we know with the way technology is progressing, things are changing, the world is becoming more global, more one. We need to adapt. We need to adapt ourselves to all the new things that are happening. And for that, it begins in the school. So, first, I think most of us are aware of how the structure of the classrooms have changed, or I would say they have just been restructured, right? So it's the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 system the new structure has. 5 years is called the preparatory. So earlier, pre-schooling or pre-education was considered to be informal schooling, and now it becomes a part of the formal schooling. And they've added grades 1 and 2 also to that segment, which is the foundation. And this is the time, and why it has been done is because all of us are aware that the maximum development of the brain of the child happens around this age, by 6 plus 7 plus 85% of the brain has been developed. So the more exposure the child gets, the more they learn. And when I'm talking about learning, we're talking about, in any case, the policy emphasizes upon holistic, integrated, engaging, and enjoyable. All four factors are very, very important. Education has to be enjoyable. How many of us enjoyed ourselves at school? And wherever we enjoyed, or whatever subject or class we enjoyed, we excel in that today. Whatever we did not enjoy, we hate it even today, irrespective of the fact that we may be having the potential, but it was not recognized because of various reasons, right? So that it begins. So sometimes they have to begin backwards. So we have to ensure that the child enjoys school, enjoys whatever is being given to them, and they're totally engaged. Again, and personally, I always feel that whenever we are, especially whenever in the classrooms, we should go back to our own school days and remember what not to do as a teacher. So if the class was not engaging enough, we were not involved in it, we would lose interest, and that's why many of us became shy, or we did not like the subject, so on and so forth. It has to be holistic and it has to be integrated. We cannot have compartments, a mathematics subject and a science subject and an English. All of it learning happens together because everything, all subjects, they are all interrelated. So in the foundation, a little child has to be exposed, rather than giving them what to do, telling them what to do, making them learn by rote. Like, I'll give you a very, very common example. Little parents, because of their whatever, they're unaware, or in their pursuit to have the best child. If the child is able to rattle out the alphabet from A to Z, they feel very proud. So the child has learned it without even realizing that the child has learned the alphabet like a song. He or she does not even understand what A means or B means, or maybe at times they will not be able to make A from B, right? So we have to ensure that we give them, we know exactly what are the areas of development that are required here. So that would begin from the social skills, the physical development. The physical development would have both gross motor development, fine motor development, and very few of us realize that how important it is for the child to have the fine motor development. It has a direct connection to the brain, how they think, how they're able to organize. It helps them develop various skills for later life. Then it has to be cognitive. So cognitive would include the literacy, the numeracy, the thinking skills, the creative skills, performing arts, visual arts. So all these have to be covered, and each one of them is equally important, and we have to realize the importance of each one of them. Then, of course, emotional development. And in today's scenario, when we talk so much about mental health and other issues, those emotional skills have to be developed right from the age of 3 when the child enters school, and that's the age that has been given in the new education policy. From 3 to 8, the children are in the foundation stage. A lot of, at present we do a lot of coloring activity, we do a lot of rhymes. We should have a lot of storytelling, and storytelling is very, very important. Not only does it develop creativity of the child, it develops thinking, because children love to weave stories, and more exposure they are given, more stories they will start developing. The communication skill develops, the language skill develops, and when they are in front of an audience, and if they are saying a story, the confidence increases. So all these are 21st century skills that we've been talking about. The critical thinking, decision making, these two skills are extremely important. Again, I would say, as adults, let us analyze, reflect, how good are we with decision making. I think for the smallest of decision, we depend on people around us to help us decide on whether to, even if you go to a restaurant, whether we should order dish A or dish B, because decision making skills have not been developed. And it's so important that they are developed right from the time the child is in the foundation stage. They have to be exposed to the environment. If you want them to become sensitive to the environment, they have to be exposed to the environment. They have to see the nature, and that's the best way of learning. So whether we are talking about the plant life, the flora, the fauna, or the animal kingdom, or the universe, the sky, all these, because this is how we will develop their interest. So and that's the reason why the policy does not specify strict or stringent curriculum for the foundation years. Not even in grade 1 and 2. There, grade 1 and 2, according to the policy, says it should not have any textbooks. So there are no textbooks prescribed. Schools can pick up some light textbooks just as support, but most of it has to be done within. And the emphasis is more
Nidhi,
on.
Nidhi, let me stop you for a minute. I think you made some really, really good points, and let us just delve over them. I'll come back to you in a while with some questions for you.
Sure.
I think it's important to really make sure that students are engaged and they are enjoying what they're doing. You have made some very good points. Let me go over to Dr. Vasil next. And Dr. Vasil, I think one of the issues um, that we face in our school education system is that words such as holistic education and experiential learning. They are very easy to memorize and say and repeat, but they are very, very difficult to implement in schools. Now, you have obviously worked in an international school system where some of these things are actually work. Now, what would be your advice or what would be your outlook on how easy it's going to be for schools, for a school to actually transition from rote learning to learning for understanding, and for the teachers to start using experiential learning in the classroom? Could you share your views on that with us, please?
Yes, Abdulji, what's more important is what are we discussing here? We're discussing the national policy framework, guiding the next course of our education journey in our schools. For that to happen, I think it's important for us to reflect where we stand today. I mean, education has been the, what I call subject of tyranny of normal. If you look at the world over the last 100 years, in which way the world has not changed. And if you apply the same logic with our schools, even in its current, operational, readiness, where we stand, where our schools are, the learning and teaching is still didactic. And all the reforms that have been, even CBSE's initiative of, say, assessments, how did it translate on ground? What did we do? And publishers start actually guiding us how to run your course of, teaching, learning strategies and assessments. So, there are multiple issues connected with it. I was reflecting critically on the policy, while policy is aspirational, but it does not clearly give us assured direction on the implementation. Because when you talk about experiential learning, when you talk about collaborative learning, when you talk about frontline modern pedagogical, interventions, it also calls for resource mobilization. It also calls for capacity building, skill sets. Where are our teachers? Look at teacher training for the last 35 years. What did it change? I mean, I remember when we used to learn, say, laws of learning in terms of transfer of learning. If you ask teachers, how does transfer takes place actually when one learning helps you in the other learning? So there is no practical know-how. And experiential learning does not happen in vacuum. It is not a concept per se. It's a holistic engagement within the schools. And when you talk about physical development, look at our schools today. Where are they in terms of their infrastructure? Broken, leaky roofs, in no health and hygiene, couple of rooms where you put children as sardines. We don't, and every state is different. It's an on concurrent list. It's not a mandatory, where every state will follow the similar kind of, there will be laws by the state and the center. So resource mobilization is not there. State of readiness is not there. If you compare state boards today vis-a-vis within the state, you'll find huge level of variance in terms of, delivery of education, inputs and the outcomes. So if you have to deliver frontline curriculum in line with the 21st century skills, you have to honestly look at what are you going to do with the gap you have? Where is the provisioning for the existing mess we are in? So I think while it's aspirational, every educator must move forward, and it has to be a collaborative exercise. The private school sector, which in a way has the ability and bandwidth to implement and execute some of these frontline initiatives, they also need to get into collaborative mode. They cannot be in, scoring points against each other. Learning is inherently collaborative exercise. Learning is inherently a relationship-based enterprise. So therefore, for this policy to be executed, we need to have a definite roadmap. We need to have very committed resources, because if you look at since 1960, I think the provisioning of resources, 6% GDP has been the aspiration since 1960. Look at current spend, what we have. It has reduced considerably to, in fact, in the 2014-15, it was 2.4% of GDP. So you cannot, and world has moved. As I'm speaking to you, 100 years gap exists between the learning outcomes of developed world and developing world. So if that is the kind of lag we have, then you need to come up with some radically, one is the radical reforms, and also committing high level of resources to transform the existing gap, what we have in our educational delivery, and also the aspirations we have for the futuristic education for our children. For experiential learning to happen, it means connection with the larger life. Learning has to be connected to the life. Let us look at our schools. What connection they have with life? Where are those teachers' skill sets where they can really make learning joyful? They can make learning experiential. No, at the center of this whole initiative is the skill sets of a teacher. And if you look at your teacher, I'm sure you and me and everyone else, I'm being modest about it, that we have huge challenges in terms of when it comes to skill sets. Can you imagine transaction in the classroom minus textbooks? Can our teachers write a resource material? So these are some of the, I think we need to get what John Hattie said, one of the great educators in his book called Visible Learning. One of the important tools for improvement is feedback. And we have never, judiciously used this tool of feedback. We have only, given some kind of prescriptive, solutions to the problems. So now is the time for progressive educators, for progressive schools to come forward and be part of this whole discussion process and identify the areas that how well we can execute and implement this new vision, or what are the challenges or roadblocks we have. See, road to progress is always under construction. I think while this is an aspiration, I think we can take those incremental steps first to get the rot out, because there's a huge rot within the system. You cannot help. Tell me which teacher today can develop a good question paper? Because when we introduce question banks, we kill the initiative of questioning. What Neil Postman says in his book called Learning as Subversive Activity, he said children enter school as a question mark, they leave as a full stop. So I think we need to have an honest reflection who we are, where we stand. And when it comes to experiential learning, there are 5 important questions an experiential educator or facilitator will ask. Did you notice? Why did this happen? Does this happen in life? Why does that happen? How can you use that? So honestly tell me that in our transactions, teaching and learning inside the classroom, how many of us, how many of our teachers have the ability, the skill, and the knowledge domain to execute? And we also then there's a serious challenge of equity and access. This pandemic has shown the truth where we stand, how many children are disadvantaged for want of good resources, for want of good quality teachers. So I think while we must be upbeat, it's a good thought. You see, life is evolutionary. Existence is evolutionary. So education must be, and these reforms should come every decade. We should not for decades, because education is evolving. And I'm sure that progressive nations must always apply themselves that every 10 years there must be a revision. On reductionism, when you talk about curriculum reduction, to develop critical thinking, how is critical thinking subjected to reduction in curriculum content? Critical thinking is, it should be the wherewithal, it should be at the heart of our learning engagement. So you cannot have a prescriptive curriculum to develop critical thinking. Critical thinking, again, is at the heart of the teaching learning process, but who will deliver it? A very competent teacher. So therefore, it weaves into many things. So we must recognize that at the heart of this, driving this initiative and making this change is the skill sets of the teacher, which are wanted today in terms of many things. I mean, I'm sure that how many teachers can create a differentiated classroom, differentiated assessments? This is hard reality. So right. I think let's accept it and be optimistic about it. It's not that we cannot do it, we should not give up. But having said that, it's important to study the past to divine the future. So we must be reflective of our past so that we can guide the course of action in the most meaningful manner and constructive manner.
I think Dr. Vasil, you made some, very good points in terms of, yes, that do we really, does India as a country have the resources and the orientation to really implement the doctrine of the policy? That's one aspect, definitely. And what I've really, learned and what I've really picked up from what you've said is that private schools must collaborate with each other. I think that's a very strong point that Dr. Vasil has made. That it's important for us not to function against each other, because what happens is a lot of times we see that in a particular city, every private school is competing with each other in terms of becoming number one. But I think it's the age of collaboration, it's the age of cooperation, and if we really want to grow, we need to work together. I think that's a very, very important message that Dr. Vasil has given. And the second important message is that you really cannot, or you may find it very difficult to implement the policy if you do not train the teachers, if you don't empower the teachers. I don't want to use the word train because of certain political, political correctness, I think. But I think it's important for us to empower teachers with the right tools. And it's not the teacher's fault. I mean, I tell everybody this, that look, how can somebody who has never played golf teach somebody else to play golf? That's never going to happen. If I have never played golf, I can't teach another person to play golf. Now, similarly, if our teachers have not, during their school years, if they have not experienced critical thinking, if they have not experienced critical thinking during their graduation or doing their B.Ed, and if they have not engaged in experiential learning, how do we expect them to train students to achieve that? So I think that is at the core of implementation for any private school, any school here, is that you must have a very serious plan to empower your teachers. You will have to invest in training your teachers. With that note, let me move on to Dr. Sharmishta. Dr. Sharmishta, there is a section on, there are two things that I would like you to share your views on. One is, how do we really develop critical thinking in students and how important that is? And also, I would like to get your views on how best schools can integrate art in the education process. Over to you, Dr. Gupta. Sharmishta ji, are you there? Is she? Okay. Have we lost her contact? Okay, Sharmishta ji, can you hear me? Okay, I think we are having some connection issues with her. Maybe it's raining too much in Calcutta. So what I'll do is I'll take a few questions right now. We have some hands raised here. Mrs. Deepika Manuel, are you there? Can we unmute Mrs. Deepika Manuel? Okay, Mrs. Sunita Sethi, are you there? I think these are the people who have raised hands, and I'll have to lower their hands. Okay, do we have Ruchi Rai here?
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Okay, good evening. Go ahead. What's your question?
Sir, I just want to discuss this aspect what sir discussed just a few minutes back about private schools collaborating with each other. Don't you think that the private schools not only need to collaborate with each other, but if we start looking for some private schools which are already into experiential learning and start giving them that or creating them as nodal schools and start collaborating with the government schools also, then it will be helpful in solving this issue. Like the private schools, they can provide some of their expertise and help the government schools to implement NEP and experiential learning in a better way.
Okay, so that's a very good question. I'm going to write this down, take it back. But I think Dr. Sharmishta is back with us. So let me quickly unmute her and let her finish her component, and then we'll go ahead and take up your question, Ruchi. What? Dr. Sharmishta, you're not audible. Can you check your mic? Sharmishta ji, can you hear me? But we can't hear you for some reason. I think there is a problem with your mic. I think we can see you, but we can't hear you for some reason. Okay, I've lost her. So let me go back to Dr. Vasil. And would you like to answer Ruchi's question, sir? Nidhi, would you like to take up this question that Ruchi asked?
Atulji.
Okay, Farooq is here back. So let me just bring back Farooq. Farooq ji, go ahead, please.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, the question is that can private schools adopt government schools so that there can be a more sharing of knowledge in terms of cooperation that you suggested and collaboration?
She was talking about experiential learning model, which some of the private schools are doing. Can government schools be engaged with it?
Absolutely.
The question is, who is going to audit them whether they are doing things right? You see, problem with sometimes we say these best practices to be followed. Who is going to audit the practices so that they can be cross-fertilized and use it in different geographical contexts, in different school environments? So we need to have some kind of accreditation and audit of these, initiatives to ensure that it can be executed and implemented.
Okay, so I think it can be done as long as there is an audit process in place, right?
Absolutely, and there has to be an authentic model of experiential learning. You see, what happens over a period of time, you see private schools are in the rat race of, say, pedagogies in terms of we're doing differentiated learning, we're doing collaborative learning, we're doing so much, in terms of improving the pedagogies, our assessments are credible. If you look at it through NEP, if there was one single recommendation I will make for the change of education system in India would be assessments. Our assessments are not credible. They don't lead us towards, it's not developmental in nature. We are highly obsessed with these, summative assessments. Even formative assessments have taken the nature of summative assessments. So these are some of the challenges which we need to address as educators. So therefore, if private schools have to engage with the government schools in terms of know-how of taking NEP forward, we need to audit private schools in terms of their rigor on these new initiatives.
Okay, got your point. So I think that answers Ruchi's question. Let me try once more if Sharmishta is back on. Sharmishta, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you, absolutely. So Sharmishta, if you missed my question, how do schools promote critical thinking, and how can really art be integrated in a school education scenario? All yours now.
Yes, so see, we've been talking about critical thinking and how we can improve it in our school and educational system. And we are talking here about holistic, integrated, enjoyable, and engaged learning. So what I would basically like to say is, critical thinking is not really going to be some kind of magic or wonder that we will be able to fish out of our bags. It will really flow from the attractiveness of learning. If we can make learning attractive, as Nidhi Sirohi was also saying that, whatever we like to do, we always excelled in it. So I think that critical thinking will automatically flow if we make learning attractive, because when learning is attractive, it will make students relate better, and from there critical thinking will flow. I'd like to share a small anecdote. After I finished my graduation from the University of Chicago, I taught for 2 years at the University of Toronto. And there I was introducing undergraduate students to a capsule on modern India, a history course on modern India. And most of these students were, some were Canadians, but some others were Indians, but who were born and, living in Canada all their lives. Their parents had come from India. And so they had very vague ideas about India. And I found after the first few classes that, they were not relating very well to the reading materials. So, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Shubhishta, go ahead.
Yes, so I found after the first few classes that these students were not relating very well to the reading materials. And as part of the course, I had included films to be shown at the end, after the reading materials. It was a course on modern India. So I had topics like nationalism, communalism, Gandhi, etc. So I had a film which had to be shown at the end of the reading material. So what I did was I just turned it the other way around. I started the class with the film. So I showed, for instance, Richard Attenborough's Gandhi. Or, you show a film from that time, and I found the way students related or asked questions changed automatically. They became more curious about that period because, it's removed by 50 years from when you are living. So I think, if we turn around our pedagogical tools a little bit, in the present education system, and I'm not talking about the film studies, film studies is something which prioritizes films, but in the general mainstream schools, if you turn around your tools a little bit and you use the film or the piece of art to start with, I think it promotes better curiosity, a better understanding to start off, because when you're relating to a piece of art, you are not only reading, you're listening, you're hearing, you're seeing, you're feeling. To feel about something is very important. And then, you ask better questions, you ask much better questions, and, that is what promotes critical learning. So, and when I was studying in the US, I had gone from India, and I had a skill set which was very important. For instance, my writing was much better than the American students, but they asked better questions than me. And that was something I picked from them. So I think now that we are moving through the new education policy, that we are moving towards a more global, a more global skill set, it is very important, going to be very important. I think we don't have a lot of time, and we're going to have to take some questions. So basically, these are the things that I had to say, that we need to really, turn our skill sets around a little bit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta, and I think totally agree with you. I think one of the strongest ways of inculcating critical thinking is to first train students to ask questions. And I remember, when I was teaching mathematics, I always used to tell my students that if you cannot ask, 5 layers of y, w, h, y, if you don't want to go deeper into a concept and keep on, and to do that, you have to keep asking, why is this relevant? Why is this important? Why does this work? I think if the students learn how to question well, how they learn how to put the right questions, their learning immediately starts and the thinking immediately starts. And culture could be one great way. I mean, showing a movie at the beginning of a class could be a great way to do that. Let me look at some more people if they have raised their hands and invite them. We have Madhu Sharma. Do we have Madhu Sharma? Madhu
Yes.
Sharma? Yes.
So yes, I would like to say that training teachers on questioning skills is very important. And I really believe with Dr. Vasil that quality is the key. Who monitors the quality of what is being done and how much is being shared?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your comment. Let me bring in Mr. Mohan Pradeep Sharma. Mr. Sharma ji, please. Can you share your comment or question? Sir, can you hear me?
Atul, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible now.
Atul, basically I wish to make one remark so that the discussions become real interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
It's a basically concept paper. It will not be fair to comment on the feet which are going to be attached after some time. So much better is that we talk about the conceptual changes which the government has proposed. And it is very assuming, hello?
Yes, go ahead.
It is very assuming that we look at from a very narrow angle and we start, speculating something which is not still come into being, which is very obvious also, because the policy doesn't have its feet still. They are to be added by the state governments. And let us appreciate that this government has a will to, address issues, gaps.
I fully agree with you, sir. I fully agree with you that I think this is just a vision paper, and I think we should limit, our discussion as if this was a vision paper. The implementation will happen next, and we'll have to see how it happens. Let me get sir. Let me just get Aruna Shivraj for 1 minute. Aruna, are you there? Okay, Aruna is not there.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Your question, please.
Sir, just now, sir told, don't talk about what we can do. You have to think about what we can do. Sir, CBSE have introduced a hub of learning. That is one of the very good collaborative system. But we were failed, sir. And already they have introduced the CCE pattern. We have failed because the teachers are not trained, sir. So first I request everyone, you have to take initiative to train the teachers. Then we can implement a new education policy. At the same time, we should start from Anganwadi system, not between the middle classes. We are facing lots of problems, sir. When the pandemic have started, we are facing lot of problem taking this online classes. So please, sir. So teachers require the training.
I think you're absolutely right, and Dr. Vasil had also pointed. It's very important to train the teachers, and in fact, we would definitely try to, make. And this is one of the Friday at 5 is one of the initiatives where we would like to expose and start talking about issues, and a lot of right now, in this session we had about 500 participants from across India who are participating, and a lot of them are teachers and a lot of them are school leaders. So I think this is one of the initiatives. We will take more initiatives to train teachers, but at the same time, I think we need to look at this a little bit more positively and do whatever we can do to implement the vision as everybody said. Now, because of lack of time, we will allow you to continue and writing your questions on the chat. We will forward this